In this video, we are going over some of the drama behind the launch of the original Xbox and a couple reasons why it almost didn't launch at all.
What?
The original Xbox was announced to the public by Microsoft in March of 2000, the same month that Sony launched the PS2. This might have actually been the first shot fired in the console wars. Earlier in the 90s, Microsoft started to see other competitors like Sony were developing consoles that had the ability to play CDs and DVDs on top of playing video games. Microsoft started to see that people would love these game consoles a ton, and on top of that, it would take away from their growing PC and new game sales.
When you decide to step up to this kind of power.
You see, with the rising popularity of gaming consoles, people could now play on a couch or in their living rooms with a feature-rich console on a much bigger screen. Around this same time, Microsoft had been having some early gaming success of their own with video games on their home PC, like Flight Simulator and Age of Empires. This meant that games like Age of Empires were now possible on Windows computers, giving the average home their first taste of what it feels like to conquer another civilization from the comfort of their home desk. Across the pond, Sony had seen worldwide success with their first PlayStation console, and were getting ready to announce the PS2. It was a powerful machine for the time, and came with a CD-ROM and a DVD player built in. The fact that the Sony PS2 could also play DVDs would make it an easy choice for a lot of families who didn't even realize that in the long run, it would teach their kid how to live on the streets of Vice City and GTA. But before Sony even publicly announced the PS2, Microsoft and Bill Gates had already gone straight to Sony CEO Nobuyuki Idai, trying to get him to let Microsoft develop the software for Sony's PlayStation console. Idai declined, as Sony wanted to develop the software internally. It was a smart move, since they wanted to maintain complete control over what they thought could be the next big thing in gaming. Idai was also worried about being reliant on Microsoft since they had become such a presence in the software and hardware space, and thought about what could happen if Microsoft decided to develop their own console. Since Sony was quickly moving full steam ahead with the PS2, Bill Gates needed to figure something out sooner rather than later. Microsoft had already tried to meet with Hiroshi Yamauchi and Genyo Takeda from Nintendo to potentially buy the company, but Nintendo declined to move forward. Microsoft could have been the BlackRock of video games. So now Bill Gates, back at Microsoft, knew Sony was developing the new PS2, and had only a year or two before the launch to figure out a way to stop the inevitable flow of sales moving from their PCs and PC games to Sony's new fun gaming consoles / cheap DVD players. Sony said, no, you can't help with the PS2, go home. And Nintendo said, no, you can't buy us, go home. So Microsoft looked inward. They pulled a group of engineers from the same DirectX program that had earlier on in the 90s allowed gaming to become a success on their PCs and started talking about a new console codenamed Midway. They named it Midway as a reference to the Battle of Midway in World War II, where American forces defeated Japanese soldiers in a turning point of the Second World War, a reminder to themselves of what they were trying to do with their new console, Savage. This console would run on a combination of Windows 2000 and DirectX 8.1, purposefully done so that the game studios of that time could easily use DirectX to design and develop games for Microsoft's console. It also allowed their console to have larger processing power than most of the other home consoles that were in the market. This is important when you look at the games Microsoft launched with, mainly the iconic Halo games, which were way more complex than other games in the early 2000s. They knew they wanted some beefy hardware moving forward. The idea of using existing PC components and technology to power a console was exciting and new. It would allow game creators to push the limits of their imagination without worrying so much about hardware limits. The current team continued forging ahead until they met resistance by other engineers. Another team had been brought in to work on the project from a recently acquired company called WebTV that Microsoft had just bought. One of the Microsoft executives, Craig, wanted Project Midway to now be led by the WebTV team. The WebTV team wanted to build their new console on Windows CE, using shared components with home appliances to reduce the cost of the system to around $300. The original DirectX team were super against this because it could mean that they were no longer going to repurpose PC components, and no PC components would have meant no internal hard drive, among other things, and ultimately the lack of an online gaming service. In the end, Bill Gates sided with the DirectX team due to the fact that they wanted to roll out what we now know as Xbox Live. He saw this as a larger benefit than sharing components with appliances to cut the costs and lower the consumer price. Everything was going according to plan, with the DirectX team in the lead. When they went to prototype the first few consoles, they realized they wouldn't just be able to outsource the building and production of their new console, specifically the box enclosure parts. Microsoft had to mass produce the units themselves, which put them way above the planned budget for the console. Internally, team members began to refer to the project as a coffin box, as they started fearing that they would be let go due to costs. Bill Gates was presented a cost report that showed he was spending more on this new console than the rest of the Windows division combined. After being reminded it was a play to compete against Sony, and that this was initially something that the project leads told him could happen, he chose to finish funding the production of Project Midway and see it through. As Microsoft started wrapping up and getting closer to announcing their new project to the world, Project Midway needed a real name. Some of the first early contenders were Windows Entertainment Project and Microsoft Interactive Network Device, or MIND. Eventually, one of the original programmers on the DirectX team, Ted Hayes, made a joke about calling it the DirectX box or the XXX box, due to the console's planned library of games designed specifically for adults versus the standard console games designed for kids that were super common. They focus tested the name with early consumers against Mind and other previous names, and Xbox won by a landslide. People loved it. The final piece left to create was the controller for the Xbox, and Microsoft reached out to the company who had just created the DualShock controllers for the PS2, Mitsumi Electric, to try and get a circuit board for the Xbox controller that was small and stacked and compact. The company refused, which led to the controller being 3 times the size of the PS2's. Eventually, a company called Flextronics came in and helped Microsoft finish up production on the Xbox by revising the final design, as well as opening a factory in Mexico to mass produce the consoles. The OG Xbox was announced, but not shown, in March of 2000, the same month the PS2 came out. It had mention of an internal hard drive, as well as a dedicated Ethernet port for internet connection and live service. People were impressed. The integration of DirectX meant that the game creators could utilize the full power of the Xbox, and Microsoft convinced Bethesda to make Elder Scrolls 3 an Xbox exclusive. Around this same time, Microsoft acquired Bungie Game Studios, right after they announced their new game, Halo Combat Evolved. Halo would be available at launch for the Xbox, and it ended up switching from a PC game to be a console exclusive. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson officially unveiled the Xbox at CES 2001 in Las Vegas. Then Microsoft released the pricing and release dates at E3 in May. Dead or Alive 3 was shown along with Halo. The system officially launched at midnight on November 15th, 3 days before the launch of the GameCube. Bill Gates personally sold the first Xbox system in New York City at launch. Against all odds, Microsoft brought their vision to reality and sold over 1 million consoles in the first 3 weeks. They sold, on average, 3 games with every Xbox, showing strong interest in the at-launch games. Overall, Microsoft lost approximately $125 for every system sold, showing that even in the early days, before Game Pass, they have always bet big on the software. They knew they were going to lose billions of dollars, and overall, they weren't as popular as the PS2. By the time it stopped being manufactured later in 2005, Microsoft had sold 24 million units and lost $4 billion. They still considered the launch a massive success, betting on the future of gaming, and rightly so. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to the channel for more quick histories. We're going to look at the PS1, the Xbox 360, and more in the next few weeks.